front that its members were responsible.
Several hundred mink have been caught alive and brought back to the farm where they were released. Farm workers wearing protective gloves have been luring them with meat or simply grabbing them. A nearby owl sanctuary has already been attacked. 3 sick birds that had been rescued and were due for release any day now were killed by a mink, itself then shot by the sanctuary owner.
If they can show me any justification in this is a female parnell, we know it's a breeding bird, we know it's had young ones, and this now has got a mate out there, and it's just a complete and utter waste of wildlife.
It had been thought that 6,000 mink were on the loose, but though all their cages were opened, not all the mink left the farm. The crucial question is how many of the 2,000 or so left in the wild will survive through to their breeding season next spring.
1 or 2 will have the instinct to know where to go, to find the food. They all have an instinct to kill, but they don't all have the instinct to know where the best food sources are. Those few that find it will survive, a lot will die of starvation.
Though many more animals will be shot or trapped, it's likely the majority will stay free. Opinions vary as to the likely impact on wildlife, but few doubt that it will set back efforts to eradicate the mink. John Andrew, BBC News, in the New Forest.
A factory which makes cranes based in Sunderland.
Before they attack even more local wildlife. But mink have already been spotted more than 20 miles away. Reports claim one even sneaked into a pub. So has this great escape given minks a taste for freedom or caused far greater havoc to animal life? Well, Cyrus Shah has been to find out.
They're brown, furry and cute, but they pack a mean bite. And now, thanks to the ALF, they're running wild all over the New Forest. The hunt is on.
Some have been seen out on the motorway, you know, the main A31, M27, and that's a fair distance from here. They've had them down in the pub in Ringwood. I understand only a few minutes ago that they've shot some down in the owl sanctuary. They've killed some of the owls.
I've shot 5 today, and they are all over the place. They are being knocked down by cars, and well, there's 3 or 4. I've got 5 people patrolling the 14 acres just looking for these mink.
So where did you see that?
I shot this one. It was telling that it was putting that one across the aviary.
3 rare birds dead. It's no joke. Mink have no natural predators and will slaughter almost any wildlife they come across.
There's all the fish in the rivers. There's moorhens. There's coots. Anything that swims or flies or walks is in danger. They can climb. They can dive into water. They can pull ducks under and drown them. They are just ferocious killers.
In nearby Ringwood, people have been told, lock up your pets, and if you see a mink, don't approach it. Ring the police or a special mink hotline. Have you seen a mink?
Only on my wife.
Yeah, I wish I had a killed bloody thing.
2 brown ones running underneath the cattle grid.
We're just keeping the door shut and just, being aware.
We've had one in a couple of bedrooms, kitchens. It's mainly outhouses and garages at the moment as they're trying to get out of the daylight. They're nocturnal animals.
Experts say the mink will suffer too. Many have already been run over and a lot will starve in the wild. A lot of people may feel that keeping wild animals locked up in cages like these is indefensible. But the question today is whether simply letting them out into the wild is any less cruel. Cyrus Shah, Channel 4 News, Crowhill Farm.
So just how divisive are direct action tactics amongst animal rights campaigners? Well, with me now is David Bowles, the RSPCA's mink farming expert, and in Cambridge, Robin Webb of the Animal Liberation Front, the group which carried out that weekend raid. First of all, Robin Webb, did you have anything to do with the raid yourself?
No, of course not. I'm just speaking on behalf of the activists who have been driven to this kind of action through the failure of democracy.
Well, we saw on that report there quite a few dead mink, dead owls, dead birds of prey. How has the ALF's action served the rights of animals?
Well, firstly, the owls themselves are predators, and regretfully, although they're rare
but they were killed by the action taken by your organisation.
No, they were killed by the mink in order to survive. Now, what
But the mink wouldn't have been there if the ALF hadn't done what they did, would they?
If the mink had remained where they were in the fur farm, all of them would have been killed in a barbaric manner for no other reason than to adorn a fur coat which nobody needs nor should want. Now, what I would like to emphasise is the Labour government has broken every single one of its animal welfare promises it made leading into the last general election, one of which was to outlaw fur farms. Now, it has already issued 3 new licences for fur farms in the life of this government, and it's also allowed a private member's bill intended to outlaw fur farms by the year 2001. It allowed that to fall in the same way it had allowed the hunting with dogs bill to fall.
So your argument in a nutshell is there is no choice but to take this sort of action?
Regretfully, the parliamentary road has been seen to fail. Labour have broken all their promises, and people have now given up on the democratic process because it's been shown to be a complete sham.
OK, David Bowles, it's a complete sham, the democratic protest. People have no choice but to take this sort of action.
The ALF's protests are unfortunately extremely misguided, and they have created far more animal welfare problems than there were in the first place, and they also have created the potential for an enormous environmental disaster in that area. Your film showed the problems with mink. They are a predator, they will kill other animals, they will kill the ducks in that area, they will probably kill the water vole, which is one of the UK's most endangered species, has declined by 90% in the last few years. And I would actually say to Robin Webb that his notion that democracy has failed is actually untrue. We are now within grasping reach of a legislative measure to ban fur farming. Only 2 weeks ago, the minister responsible for fur farms in the UK, Elliot Morley, said in the House of Commons that the government was still committed to its manifesto proposition to ban fur farming, and when they released the new licences at the beginning of this year, they said to each fur farm, we are doing it only for 3 years, and then you are going to be phased out. That to me is very clear. It's the end of fur farms.
Has the ALF made that grasping reach of legislation, made it less in reach as you see it?
That is the ironic thing, is that the ALF's actions are actually making the RSPCA's job, which is to try and get rid of fur farms. We agree, just as the ALF do, that fur farms have huge welfare problems. We are trying to get rid of them. Their actions, unfortunately, have had the opposite effect of what they're trying to do. It's created more welfare problems, and it's actually shown that the democratic process which the RSPCA is working through may fail because of their actions.
OK. Robin Webb, you're further away from legislation now, and you've damaged wildlife.
Now, I'd like to point out that Elliot Morley had said that the most likely vehicle to ban fur farming would be a private member's bill. A private member's bill was introduced, and the Labour government allowed it to fall on the 3rd of July. And as for an environmental disaster, many scientific reports over the years, including one from the RSPCA itself, which Mr. Bowles must be aware of, have concluded that there is a niche in this environment for the mink. And I would point out that
this is a non-indigenous species, is it not?
May I point out that we already have mink in the wild, we already have feral mink.
Yes, but they're feral. This is we need to clear this point up. These are non-indigenous animals to this country. Yes or no?
I must point out that...
Is that correct or is that not correct?
I must point out that they were first released in the late 1920s by the fur trade itself and have been breeding ever since.
Released. So therefore, we are upsetting the balance in releasing these things in these kinds of numbers, are we not?
We have had mink in the wild since the late 1920s, and that was the fault of the fur trade itself when the bottom fell out of the fur market.
OK, so the ALF, they're making, if you like, these animals have a niche in our ecosystem, and the ALF have provided them with an opportunity.
I would say that the ALF science needs to be updated. Firstly, 2 scientific reports from last year showed that mink, feral mink, as you say, not an indigenous species, have been seen to be affecting waterfowl in Scotland and water voles in England, which I have already said are an endangered species and protected by UK legislation.
OK, but one final and perhaps rather crude point, but say what you like about the ALF, they've put the issue on the agenda, have they not?
The issue was already on the agenda because groups like the RSPCA have been working very closely with the government, and again, Robin Webb is not correct to say that the government were going to do it by a private member's bill. The government are adamant that they will introduce legislation to do this, to get rid of fur farms. Their commitment has not failed.
OK, just briefly, if I can just go back to Robin Webb on the issue of publicity, albeit there are dead animals, you've put the issue very firmly on the debate again, have you not?
What I would like to say is that the first Animal Welfare Act was passed in 1822. All of the campaigning since then has seen an increase in institutionalised animal abuse that the early reformers could never have imagined. We've got factory farming, we've got vivisection, we've got fur farms. None of this has been prevented by legislation over 170, 180 years of campaigning.
Gentlemen, there we'll have to leave it. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you.
When we come back, more news. When we come back, more news and a weather forecast, plus new health fears about genetic.
That its members freed the mink from a fur farm near Ringwood at the weekend.
Several hundred mink have been caught alive and brought back to the farm where they were released. Farm workers wearing protective gloves have been luring them with meat or simply grabbing them. A nearby owl sanctuary has already been attacked. 3 sick birds that had been rescued and were due for release any day now were killed by a mink, itself then shot by the sanctuary owner.
If they can show me any justification in this is a female barn owl, we know it's a breeding bird, we know it's had young ones, and this now has got a mate out there, and it's just a complete and utter waste of wildlife.
It had been thought that 6,000 mink were on the loose, but though all their cages were opened, not all the mink left the farm. The crucial question is how many of the 2,000 or so left in the wild will survive through to their breeding season next spring.
1 or 2 will have the instinct to know where to go, to find the food. They all have an instinct to kill, but they don't all have the instinct to know where the best food sources are. Those few that find it will survive, a lot will die of starvation.
And meanwhile, police, forestry and Ministry of Agriculture officials have been meeting to coordinate action with local landowners. An information line to report sightings is being opened from tomorrow. Though many more animals will be shot or trapped, it's likely the majority will stay free. Opinions vary as to the likely impact on wildlife, but few doubt that it will set back efforts to eradicate the mink. John Andrew, BBC News, in the New Forest.
England's cricketers.
Conservationists say the action by the Animal Liberation Front poses a serious threat to wildlife. The mink were released from a farm at Ringwood near the New Forest, an area given special protection by the Rio Earth Summit. From Hampshire, Ben McCarthy reports.
Tonight, there are still more than 2,000 mink on the loose in the New Forest area. They're fierce predators, feed on anything and will even attack people if cornered. At this sanctuary, 3 endangered birds of prey have died after being attacked by the mink. Staff have been trying to shoot them, but only a handful have been killed.
5,000 mink, they'll devastate every bit of wildlife that there is.
The Animal Liberation Front say their action in freeing the mink was justified.
Mink are naturally wild creatures. They're not meant to live in small cages, and had they remained where they were, all of them would have been killed. Every single individual would have been killed for no more than to be part of a fur coat.
But Rob Ellis, who's the local wildlife officer, says those who released the mink have caused a huge problem.
They don't really care what's happened to the environment. We are facing a catastrophe here unless we can get people to help us eradicate the problem.
The owner of the mink farm says he was targeted because he's facing court action for cruelty to his animals. He denies the charges and says he won't be driven out of business.
It's been my living there for 50 years. I enjoy what I'm doing, and why should I give in to these people? And I don't intend to anyway, so...
This is one of the mink that's now been recaptured and brought back here to the farm. For their weight, they're described as among the most dangerous and vicious animals in the world, and there are still thousands of them roaming the countryside around here and causing havoc. Tomorrow a hotline will be set up so the public can report any sightings and the mink can be rounded up, but it's likely that hundreds of them will never be caught. Ben McCarthy, News at 10, Hampshire.
Iraq kept up its personal attack on the UN Weapons Inspector Richard Butler.
But they could end up having a devastating effect on the local wildlife. The tranquility of the Hampshire countryside has been shattered in the first days of the summer heat wave.
Thank you.
Got him? Yeah. Got him, Pete.
Thanks to the efforts of animal rights activists, the citizens of Ringwood and the New Forest are now fighting a wholesale invasion by several thousand particularly vicious predators.
This is the largest collection of owls in Europe, if not the world. So we've got the best breeding project of birds of prey and owls in England. I'm very, very worried. We've got 5 people on patrol, and if they see a mink, we go straight out with the gun and we shoot them on sight.
But the fight back began too late for these birds, among the first casualties of the mink war.
These are the casualties. One female barn owl, which is a breeding bird in the wild. They were in an aviary which we used for rehabilitation, and in went the mink, killed them like that, and now we've got to incinerate them.
These are the four-legged criminals at the centre of the conflict. The mink is a formidable predator right at the top of the food chain. They can swim, they can climb, and they'll attack just about anything that moves. As many as 6,000 mink were released from this farm on Saturday. Not all made a clean getaway, but for the time being at least, the owner, Terence Smith, is reduced to chasing his farm animals round the countryside.
We're collecting as many as 300 or 400 a day. We're getting them back in their cages, but there's still a long way to go, and there's still, well, certainly thousands wandering about the countryside. Yeah, we found them in hotels, we found them in nurseries, tomato greenhouses, an old lady's kitchen, well, everywhere in fact.
The new forest keepers are in the front line of the campaign to stop thousands of the unwelcome visitors disrupting the delicate ecosystem of an area identified by the Rio Earth Summit as a vital environmental haven.
We are currently upping our already existing mink trapping campaign using these live-set humane cage traps. Our fears are that we may see delicate species, for instance the sea trout that are in the forest streams, or waterfowl along the forest streams and ponds, that the mink will naturally predate. And obviously if the number of natural mink has been increased due to this escape, those prey species that are naturally preyed upon by the mink could suffer.
Those responsible for wildlife don't condone mink farming, but neither do they condone the actions of the animal liberationists.
Well, I think it's a senseless operation, because at the end of the day they're going to be killed. We've been told by the police to shoot them.
The animal liberation activists claim that even if they only succeeded in giving the mink a brief taste of freedom, it was worth it. And the man they targeted seems to sense the days of his industry are numbered.
According to this present government, they are the pledge that they were going to ban all fur farms. And I imagine we're all feeling that's going to happen, but when, I don't know.
So what exactly was the point of all this? I'm joined by David Bowles from the RSPCA and Andrew Butler from People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Andrew Butler, let's not even have the argument about the merits of mink farming. Let's concede you that one and say it's a very bad thing. But even if it is a very bad thing, it's just mad to let all these mink out, isn't it? And they promptly go and kill all the other animals in the area.
Well, not really. I mean, you can quite understand why people do this. As you say, we know of the cruelty of fur farming, and most people feel powerless to do something to help. So they feel that by giving these mink just a taste of freedom, anything outside of a mink farm is better than the horrors that they're subjected to on a mink farm.
Except not much fun if you're a barn owl, by the looks of what we saw there.
Those barn owls were captive barn owls. They were in a cage. They shouldn't have been there in the first place. But
mink are not natural predators in that area. They will kill animals who otherwise might have had a slightly longer life expectancy.
But there are lots of other natural predators in that area as well. I think it's well to remember that, yes, mink are not native to Britain. They were actually introduced by furriers. And over the years, over 100,000 mink have, in fact, escaped from fur farms of their own volition. The fur farmers are the real villains here, and I don't think we should forget that. But in the wider environment, these mink, as we've seen in the past when large numbers of mink have got into the environment, will spread over a very, very wide area. They're solitary animals. They will mark their own territory, so no one area will suffer too badly. Also, they eat a huge range of animals. They will eat fish, they'll eat birds, they'll eat other small mammals, so no one particular species will be particularly adversely affected either.
I'm horrified by what Andrew is saying, that it's okay that they're going to widely range over the UK and basically decimate many animals. It's not just the barn owls. We had reports today that they've attacked dogs. We've had reports that they've attacked chickens. The water vole, one of the UK's most endangered species, is well known to be under threat from mink.
You mean it was under threat already?
It was under threat already, yes. Let me put this into perspective. The mink population, which shouldn't be there in the first place in the wild, it's a feral species, it's about 40,000 animals. At the moment, they let out, over the weekend, about 6,000 animals. So that's over 10% of the existing population, which is going to go through all of the wildlife in that area and is going to decimate it. It is a huge welfare problem and it is a huge environmental problem.
It is a bit of an own goal, isn't it, to let all these out and then they go and decimate water voles, which presumably animal rights people are in favour of as well.
Let's take water voles as one instance. As I said, this has happened in the past. It's not a first, and they haven't decimated natural populations of animals in the past. With water voles, as I said, they eat a wide range of animals. Water voles ended up making up less than 2% of the types of animals that they ate. Britain is awash with alien species, rabbits, for example.
We don't want to put more in them, do we?
Well, this is a situation...
population has declined by 90%. Most of that is due to predation by mink.
And animal populations are self-regulatory. If they are being predated, they will actually increase their numbers to compensate.
Well, all right, but
so that's something that's
going
to
happen. For humans. I mean, all that's happening is that someone lets all these mink out and everyone goes around shooting them as pests. So it doesn't do much good for the mink, does it?
People go around
a bit longer.
People go around shooting every animal that moves, pretty much. They shoot rabbits, they shoot foxes, they shoot mink. I don't think that's a good situation at all.
The worst thing of this is that we have to clean up the problem now. The RSPCA and other people are there on the ground. They are doing the work. They're not sitting in a studio pontificating. They're going to have to do the hard work. They're going to have to go in and try and capture those animals live, which we would like to do. But of course, as you said, those people are down there trying to shoot them now. And we know that the RSPCA centres are going to be flooded with pets coming in that have been bitten by these animals, and it's going to be a huge welfare problem.
It hasn't been in the past, so I'd be very surprised if it suddenly became one now.
It has been in the past.
I think it's well to remember as well that any taste of freedom, these animals will, some of these animals will live a long natural life, and that has to be a good thing.
Andrew Butler, David Bowles, we'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. A very quick look at the papers, a bit of a mixed bag tomorrow. East Africa, the US agents sift rubble and rumour of Nairobi